Hello, this is Saul again, and this week at my contract I was looking at some Salesforce data. I am wrangling a little data lake for the company I'm working for. We're trying to relate a bunch of different data silos together, and one of the, of course, important data sources for many companies is Salesforce. Of course, using the Salesforce API is like drinking data through a straw. It's very slow and it's tedious, and you only get a little bit at a time. But they do have a data export feature where you can get everything, all the different tables, and there's hundreds of them. They just deliver it to you in a zip file full of CSVs, and actually for my needs that's great because I want to be able to zip through it with VisiData and see it as quickly as I can and get a feel for all the stuff that's there and not just have to piece it together one little bit at a time. So I can't show you that data because of course that's proprietary, but I did do a sample download of another Salesforce data set that's in their own sandbox, and so it doesn't have a whole lot of data, but it does have some, and it's a decent structure. So here's the zip file, and if we were just to load this up in VisiData, then you can see right away here's all of the CSV files that are in that zip file. Now if we wanted to open all of these up and just see how many rows and columns each one has, then we can just press gEnter in the zip file itself and it'll open everything in the zip file. It's also work on a directory sheet, everything that's selected, or if nothing's selected it opens up all sheets. We can go to the Sheets sheet and we can see all those sheets, and sure enough here they all are. Now you'll notice that a lot of these have 0 rows and those don't have any data in them. There's no rows, only the columns, and so I think those are just reasonable just to delete at the get-go. There's no data in them. And then a couple of these also have only 1 row, like content version and I don't know, user app info. Not all that interesting, so let's delete those too. And we're left here is 23 sheets. Actually, let's delete this zip file at the very end here. That's the original zip file, and then of course the sheet itself. We got 22 sheets of data that actually have data in them. And so if we go back and we can see here's the file search activity, and this is what it looks like. It's just got a bunch of standard Salesforce fields, and oh, I see. This is when people are searching for things. This is a search term that you have, and yeah, just basic data. It's great. One thing that I was doing with the Salesforce data and data in general, it's really good to have a codebook, which is a data science term for the metadata about a collection of data. It's basically every table and every column in that table and a description of what it means, the context for it, what kind of values it could take, and stuff like that. For a Salesforce data set like this, with literally, if we go to the column sheet for this sheet, of course we would see just the columns for the sheet. Maybe there's 20 of them. If we press G-Shift-C, then that'll take us to the column sheet for all columns. And as you can see, there's 555 columns here, and that would be incredibly tedious to go through them all. Fortunately, we can see all these columns at once here in VisiData, and if we wanted to just dump them out in spreadsheet form to the kind of codebook, then we can just do that. Also, what is interesting is that instead of going to the all columns sheet, we can go to the all describe sheet, which is G-Shift-I. Basically, it's just like a column sheet, except for instead of showing the column attributes, it shows you some statistical attributes of it, including the number of distinct values in there. Now, this is something that I noticed right away. Any column that has only one distinct value is not all that interesting. If it has only 1 row, then that just means that's just the only value in that row. But if it has more than 1 row, that means that the value in the column is the same all the way down. If it's got 10,000 rows and 1 distinct value, that value is not all that interesting. We can, I think, take the columns with only 1 distinct value. I'm going to press comma here on the 1, and 318 columns have only 1 value in them. As far as I'm concerned, not very interesting, so we can delete all those. And GD, and very quickly we're down to 237 columns that are more interesting here. Now another thing here, I myself, when I was looking through the Salesforce data, all the ID columns they have, those are just the key column, the ID column, and I mean, it should be pretty obvious what it is. It's the reference point for every other column that looks at it. We don't have to describe that. Similarly, we've got a created date for every, well, it should be for every table. Why is that not on every table? Well, anyway, last modified date, last modified. There should be, oh, you know why? Because these only had 1 value in a lot of those other tables. So we can, really, this is such basic data. So we can also select all those and delete those. Anyway, when we get down to it, we have a collection of columns that we might want to actually describe, actually put in the codebook. So what I wound up doing actually at work is I made a copy of this sheet, and that's because I just want to have it as data and not actually the column sheet itself. I don't want these to be literal columns. I want these to be which is data rows. And so gtick, as you'll see, converts it to just plain old rows. This is a frozen copy of that sheet. Otherwise, it's identical. I'm going to remove the rest of these columns here. And if I wanted to, I could either turn these key columns on or off, but if I wanted to, I could just go ahead and add some more columns like description, and this is the ZA command I'm adding here. Oh yeah, possible values that are in there, etc. I can rearrange to my liking, and then I can go ahead and save it off as Salesforce codebook in whatever format I want to, and then I can fill it out in either VisiData or another tool. But in the end, I've got now the 207 columns that are at least mildly interesting or possibly interesting in a nice, concise form. And like you saw, this took only a handful of keystrokes, whereas if I was having to do this with a script, it would have been, been 10 or 20 or maybe even more lines of code that I would have had to figure out, and that's not necessary with VisiData. That is the big column and big describe sheets, and how you can use it to look at many data sets at once. Thanks for using VisiData, and I will see you next time.